access of the plants to take you in there. It's not as difficult a transition for people who are embedded in a natural world. Our problem is that we don't even know we're embedded in nature. We still think that we can kind of be separate and apart from it. And one of the big shocks we have when we have an indigenous style, shamanic style ceremony, is we discover that we are embedded. And a lot of the indigenous folks kind of think that's fun, that we think that that's so unusual. But it just shows you how, that's what Guillermo was saying when he said Westerners have lost their cultural roots, and it means the connection to nature. He doesn't mean that in some romantic way or anything like that. It just means that we're part of nature. And so once that is resurrected within us, once we reconnect to that, then you start going into the deeper levels of your own exploration.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question.
It does, and that actually is related. I'll just throw one little last thing on there, which is that sounds to me like maybe they may have less intense, based on what you said, less intense sort of experience of that sort of crash of the ego, that ego sort of fear, like loss, because I think that sort of egoic loss experience, like in order to come up against that, you have to have sort of a pretty well-developed ego in the first place, a pretty well-developed sort of sense of being separate from being a distinct individual, and so that actually answers like a sort of another question that I hadn't even thought to ask about sort of that, like whether that experience of fear and sort of negative experiences was less or different in indigenous sort of experiences of taking it. And I think, yeah, that's helpful. It's helpful, definitely.
Yeah, no, but we don't want to, I mean, the indigenous people that we meet, or like Guillermo and so on, I mean, they too have egos, right?
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
they're solid egos, just like we are. They're no different. It's just that the framework in which that they've grown up, their cultural background is different, so that they don't feel as alienated from the natural environment as we do, but they still have strong sense of self and strong egos like anybody else. But when they go into that world, they're more trained to understand where they're going and not to be as frightened by it. But even Guillermo told me, he went through many years of exploring the dark side, and he's so that when people have that experience in ceremony, he knows where they are,
right,
and he knows how to bring them back. Right?
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sophie.
Anybody else have a question? One more?
Hello. Thank you for sharing this time with us. My name is Mark, and I guess you could say I'm a librarian, so I'm interested in the three, right off the top of your head, in doing this documentary, or maybe some written material that led you to discover that you wanted to make this, the three like authors or books that you can think of, and also, just out of curiosity, what the heck is that red thing over your right shoulder on top of the bookshelf? And could you briefly tell us the story about that?
I didn't even know, I put that light up there tonight thinking that I didn't have enough light here, so it's revealed stuff that I didn't even know I had right there. Oh, you mean that bag that's sort of up there, that one?
Oh, it's a bag, okay. I thought it was a bell maybe, or... Yeah,
no, it's a wooden carry bag. It's a wooden bag that you could sling on your shoulder, but it's carved out of wood. It's from Lombok, the island of Lombok in Indonesia. And when I was filming down that area, I just bought that from somebody who had been using it. These are bits and pieces of different parts of the world, I guess, my study area. But yeah, sorry, but it's probably a bit distracting.
No, not at all. I just had a natural curiosity about it.
Yeah, well, I can take you on a little tour of the office later. Yeah, I should do that. Yeah.
Maybe the collectors would appreciate it.
Yeah. You asked about books, Mark. you know, one of the most impressive books for me about ayahuasca in particular is a book by Benny Shannon. Do you know him? Benny Shannon?
I don't.
Shannon. And he wrote a book called The Antipodes of the Mind. And the subtitle was Charting the Phenomenology of the Ayahuasca Experience. And he is a professor, head of psychology at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, right? I mean, so he's an Israeli, and he went to the Amazon and thought he'd go for a few weeks, and he ended up spending a year moving throughout Brazil and Peru. He's a cognitive psychologist, and he came back. He said, I went as an atheist, you know, as a psychologist, as a scientist, and he said, and when I returned, he said, I no longer was. And then he wrote his book, and you can get it on Amazon and so on, but it's a very in-depth and extremely well-written book about the varieties of ayahuasca experiences. He pulls together the whole world of what people experience. He doesn't try to tell you what it means. He just tries to suggest that this is the range of the world that you're moving into. So it's called the Antipodes of the Mind. Antipodes meaning like north and south poles, right? Like the extremes of where the mind can go. The basic notion is that what ayahuasca does is it opens up the mind, the consciousness, to join into the continuum of consciousness. The consciousness is a continuum throughout time and throughout space. And in our unique lives, we experience the reality consensus that we live with, but that when we go into these other times, ayahuasca experience, we can open up into the stream of consciousness, and we may experience things there that we don't experience in normal consensual reality. Which is not to say that we're making it up, it's just to say that we're accessing this because we've released the filters. So he was very good at the way he described that. And there are any number. I mean, I also thought Jeremy Narby's book called The Cosmic Serpent, also an excellent book, because he helps connect the notion of anacondas and snakes and so on to the DNA double helix, and how, in some ways, the shamans are able to, through the ayahuasca experience, take themselves, but also take participants into an examination almost on the molecular level of what's going on within one's mind and one's brain. Again, these are all intellectual thoughts. I mean, in the end, ayahuasca is not intellectual. Ayahuasca, in the end, is emotional. It's spiritual. It's the best word to describe it is ineffable, meaning you cannot explain it.
Right. Seems like the best way would just to do it, but
just to be there. And the most important thing that I learned in my experiences was not to have expectations, because if you have expectations, you're already bringing your wish list in. You're already bringing your ego desires in, right? But you should have an intention. You should have an intention as to why you're there and what you're hoping to learn. And if you go in with that kind of intention, then there's a pretty high certainty that you're going to get some insights into the intention that you brought to the ceremony.
I thought
At
it was.
least that's what my experience.
I thought it was interesting in the film when they were talking about the last day that it was like the shaman he said, well, you can expect that there might be sort of a death, and then it was interesting to see the two folks from Toronto and how it's sort of, for him that was a release, and for her maybe she went more into like sort of the darker aspects of the death, and it made me kind of think about preconceived notions a little bit, and how that you can't really ever escape that being human, and just sort of everybody's going to sort of react differently, but maybe it's better to just do it without any knowledge whatsoever, or or perhaps you can prepare yourself on a certain level, but ultimately, who knows, really.
Well,